on that. And so, but I'm hoping that the book will do well. I'm planning to write a screenplay based on the book. I was going to try to get it optioned, but then one of my producer friends said, why don't you do the screenplay, because they're probably going to want their own writers if they option the book. And he said it'd be better for you, better money and everything. So I'm going to do that as soon as I get a chance, which might be 2 or 3 months from now.
How about like the true crime community? Like any conspiracy theories about this guy having accomplices or anything like that? Other motives?
No, it's a pretty straightforward case. No, there's no accomplices at all. He worked all by himself, and it's pretty straightforward case.
Any comments from Taco Bell Incorporated? Hey, Ron,
no, I haven't.
Take our name off your book there. No.
I don't know if they want this publicity or not. on that sort of stuff. But I was going to go by there. I was going to go by to the one near the former Eastland Mall, which has been torn down, the one he worked at, just to see what it was like on that. But I never did get a chance to do that. But he ended up working, and that's why I met most of these girls, and became friends with them. Like I said, it was just incredible double life. I mean, everybody I talked to said he seemed like the nicest guy, just really, really, thoughtful. He attended like 2 or 3 of the funerals of the girls.
Right.
And he met one mother, Dee Sumter, Shauna Huck's mother, a couple of days after, and it was just pouring his sympathy out to her, for the murder of her daughter and all that sort of stuff. So, and he ended up going to the funeral chapel and sitting there, and even on Carolyn Love, when she was murdered, she disappeared. He dumped her body on this side road, and they didn't find it 2 years later. But after she was murdered, he went with his girlfriend and a relative of Caroline down to the police to file a missing persons report. Just cold-blooded. Incredible
Story here. Bad Henry, the Murderous Rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler by Ron Chepesiuk. You can check him out at ronchepesiuk.com. Don't forget, Ron Chepesiuk has a radio show every 8 p.m. on Thursday, Crime Beat on the artistfirst.com. Tell us about Carlos Later. I know you got this TV series just came out on VIX Spanish station streaming.
Yeah.
Pariso Blanco, What's going on with Carlos Later? He fell off the map.
Carlos Later is really an interesting guy. He's one of the most important figures in the history of the international drug trafficking. He was a member of the Medellin cartel, a partner of Pablo Escobar, the really famous gangster, and he pioneered the distribution method for the mass distribution of cocaine to the U.S. And it led to the big epidemic we started experiencing in the late 70s, with cocaine. He essentially operated at an island called Norman's Cay in the Bahamas, which is about 200 miles from the U.S. And before this time, the cocaine was usually transported on people. So you can imagine how many people it would take to transport a substantial amount of cocaine to the U.S. And he came up with this plan to use planes, and they would fly to Norman's Cay, refuel, get supplied with the materials, and then they'd fly into the U.S. And of course, in those days, there was no terrorism, right? Back in the late 70s, so it was easy to fly into the U.S. on these old runways, abandoned airports, and then the cocaine would be offloaded into trucks, and they'd be transferred all over the country. And he quickly made him a billionaire, and on that. And then he got kicked out of the islands. About 82, the DEA put pressure on the corrupt Bahamian government, and he ended up back in Colombia, where he tried to organize a political party, essentially to fight extradition. The U.S. are trying to get the Colombian government to pass an extradition law to have these drug traffickers transported to the U.S. for trial. And he organized his party. He had a little success. He actually got a couple of people elected to the government. And they ended up killing Rodrigo Bonilla, the Minister of Justice, which is a bad thing to do because the government came down hard on them and they had to flee the country. They ended up in Panama under Noriega, who provided protection, and they got suspicious that Noriega was going to turn him into the U.S. For a deal because he was being investigated for drug trafficking. So they left there and they went to Nicaragua and eventually came back to the U.S. By then, later was becoming less of an important figure in the drug trade. And he was also using drugs and acting really crazy. He was an interesting guy. He was a neo-Nazi and a racist, really, on that. And he espoused, the destruction of the U.S. He saw cocaine as a weapon that could help destroy the U.S. He came to the U.S. when he was very young, and he had high expectations of success in the U.S., but it didn't turn out, and I think that turned him against the U.S., and he had this visceral hatred for them, and also for Jews as well.
What about any connections to, like, CIA or anything like that?
Well, that's interesting because when later was convicted, he was convicted to life plus 155 years in jail and all that, and he disappeared in the witness protection program within the prison system, and everybody was speculating, these conspiracy theories, these crazy conspiracy theories, and I would get calls eventually from people that wanted to interview me or find out what I thought about that, and a couple of them thought that Slater was working for the CIA, which was really stupid because he operated before 1988, and any knowledge you would have prior to that time, how could it help the CIA today? You know what I mean? And that was because he was put in the witness protection program because they thought that he had threatened a judge. And so they put him. They took him out of this prison, and they whisked him away, and he disappeared within the so-called WITSEC program. That's the witness protection program for prisoners. And then he showed up in 2005, suing the U.S. government for a broken promise that they would eventually transport him to Germany. And he disappeared, and then there was rumors that he was going to be let out, and but nothing ever happened. And then one day, June 17th, 2020, he was on a plane to Germany, where he lives now. And how is he doing? I don't know. I told you. Well, there was this woman that came out with so-called book on Carlos Slater. She claimed that she had collaborated with Carlos Slater on this book, and this Colombian radio station interviewed her, and she was on the air, and she was talking about how she had collaborated to did this book. And then he goes, let's find out what Carlos Slater has to think about it. And Carlos Slater showed up on the air, and he said he didn't know the woman. He never collaborated with her, and that he was going to sue her for her lying about collaborating on the book and all that sort of stuff. But on that show, he also said that he was coming out with a documentary later this year. He said it should be out by the end of the year, and he couldn't talk about it because the producer that's doing the thing has him committed to silence.
It reminds me of that story. That guy wrote the book about Howard Hughes. The same thing.
Howard Hughes. Yeah,
he got confronted with that. And I told you off the air, my friend who wrote that book. But it was kind of more of a stunt, a publicity stunt, when he was accused of not knowing the subject. That whole conspiracy theory about Carlos Slater came out because people discovered he was missing in the Bureau of Prisons database over the Chandra Levy case, right? Yeah. So and conspiracy theories, people. I love them.
I don't, because one of my books, Sergeant Smack, and it dealt with Ike Atkinson, and accused of shipping drugs in the bodies and caskets
yeah.
of American soldiers. And I did the book with him on that, promising him that I would clear that up, and I did. Although it appeared in American Gangster, the movie, and so when I started out investigating that angle, there were like 12,000 articles on the internet, and all of them said that that was true, that drugs are being transported on the bodies of American servicemen in Vietnam,
or at least in body bags to Fort Bragg.
Yeah, after I investigated, there was 8,000 word chapter in my book. After I investigated, I concluded this was crazy. It was absurd. There was no reason why. And then this reporter from the AP called me, and he wanted me to talk about that. And he had a preconceived idea that it was true. And he started arguing with me about the conspiracy theory. And I told him, I said, don't believe me. I said, I put him in touch with some of the people that I had interviewed him. I said, these people know, they were there. And then he wrote this article, and it was the first article to cast doubt on the theory. And interestingly, American Gangster, which was a pretty good movie, if you discount the cadaver angle.
Well,
it was a really good movie, and there's a good chance that it would be nominated for an Oscar and all that. But then all this doubt that started to appear about the veracity of the story, and I think that I may have had something to do with not getting nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, but also too, I think the portrayal of Nicky Barnes. I think Nicky Barnes is way more powerful than those Georgia boys, who were a much smaller organization, as far as I understand. No.
Yeah.
They portray Nicky Barnes as some kind of
clown.
I
would say that, and also the way they portrayed Nicky Barnes, Cuban Gooding, played him as he was sort of a drug-crazed
like a clown,
and all that, and sort of a fool, really, but which is not true because he was a very smart,
very serious guy,
very smart gangster, right? And as far as who was bigger, I did the book on the biggest of them all, Frank Matthews, who disappeared with a paramour and $20 million in 1973.
And that's Sergeant Smack?
No, that's Frank Matthews. That's Black Caesar.
Right.
The book Black Caesar.
Right. What about Sergeant Smack? Is he still around doing interviews? Is he alive?
Well, he passed away in 2015.
Okay.
And we did, we collaborated on that, and the book's available, of course. Anybody who's interested.
Yeah, Sergeant Smack. You can find that at ronchepesiuk.com. And
they can go on Amazon and check it out.
There you go.
On that, then. Right.
And for people, too, the way you spell Chepesiuk, it's a little unusual. It's Chepesiuk, but it's pronounced Chepesiuk.
I always tell people it means Smith in Polish.
Well, it's easy to find. An unusual name. It's easy to find. Let me ask you a question, too. Now, the way we met was over that whole John Dugan thing. John Dugan said he was in Russia and he had those tapes of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Okay, and we had our little discussions about that. What do you think ever came of that?
Well, Putin invaded Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm Ukrainian.
Okay.
And Dugan's beholding to Putin for staying in Russia because he fled the U.S. The U.S. government. They had a warrant for his arrest on that, and he could be sentenced to several years in prison if they ever catch up with him. And so we had sort of a parting of the ways in a way because I wasn't going to put up with that bullshit. With that the Russian government were right in invading Ukraine.
Yeah, he was like a spokesperson. He was in the bag for Putin for sure. But what do you make of his claims that he had those tapes? Because I think largely it's been debunked.
Well, I remember I told you, I said he showed me tapes,
right,
and it was sort of like spontaneous. It looked like actual a hidden camera.
Yeah.
In the room there was an old guy, young girl, and I only saw about 3 minutes of it and all that. He just wanted to show me on that. But a lot of people, questioned, his veracity on that. I've talked to other people, and they claim that he's totally BS on that.
And also, too, there's tapes out there that look just like Clinton, that look just like Joe Biden, that's or actors.
Now with artificial intelligence, right?
Oh, that's a whole other story.
It's